Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a Thirsty Thursday edition of The Sweat presented by DraftKings. I am Emerson Latzia alongside Jesse Cofield. A not-so-stacked late slate around Major League Baseball tonight. In fact, only 3 games, 6 starting pitchers to choose from. We'll be talking NHL in this show. We'll be talking NBA Finals in this show, which tip off tonight.
Yeah,
but
they start tonight.
Cofield, we are going to start on the diamond, and I believe we have 3 analysts here to help us out.
You're not wrong, all right?
That's
DK's, Gary and Thorne, Tanner Kern, and RotoWire's Eric Halterman, they are here. Guys, need your top DFS and sportsbook plays. 3 games, 6 starting pitchers to choose from, but let's start with your favorite DFS hitter, Gare Bear. Who's it gonna be? I read it.
I knew you would do it. I knew you would do it.
I know.
I think Yordan Alvarez. He's the most expensive hitter on tonight's slate, but I think he's entirely worth it. The great thing about Alvarez, we talk all the time about guys who are matchup proof. He really is. If you look at his career numbers, he's got a 164 WRC plus against right-handed pitching. He's got a 164 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. He is just as dangerous against southpaws as he is in an opposite hand matchup, which makes him unlike a lot of left-handed power hitters. So sometimes I think Alvarez's ownership can get a little bit fuzzy just because people go, oh, he's facing a lefty tonight. I don't use lefties against lefties. You use Yordan Alvarez against anybody. So far this season, a 348 isolated power, a 174 WRC plus in left-on-left matchups. He has the best expected WOBA of any Astros player against left-handed pitching. So going up against Reed Detmers, who has been beat up from time to time this season, I think Alvarez can do some damage.
All right, Tanner Garian has given us a purported matchup-proof pick, so who are you rolling with?
So Garian took the words right out of my mouth. I'm going the same exact direction. Yordan Alvarez. This season, he's hitting 318 off lefties compared to 255 off righties. It's really a no-brainer move with Reed Detmers on the mound in this very small slate. Detmers got a 4.93 ERA, a 1.53 WHIP. I think he's going to be afraid to pitch to Valdez. He's going to leave one over the plate. And it wouldn't surprise me if he takes him deep. Valdez only has 1 career hit off Detmers, but only 5 at-bats. So don't expect, he doesn't have that. He doesn't know exactly what he's getting tonight, but I still love him. Especially with how he's dominated lefties.
All right, Eric, are we going 3 for 3 here? What's up?
Well, we may touch on Yordan Alvarez again later, but I won't go with him in this section for the sake of variety. Those guys have got your expensive players on lockdown. So let's go with Royce Lewis as a cheap option, 2,900. In a small slate like this, I think you need to find the small number of very promising cheap options, lock those in, and then get creative with the more expensive spots. And Royce Lewis is going to settle in as much more than a $2,900 shortstop. He's had plenty of setbacks to start his major league career. This is a guy who was the first overall pick all the way back in 2017 and has torn his ACL twice. But he's back now and looking good in the minors. In his rehab assignment, he had 4 homers in 8 AAA games. Not sure if he's going to settle in as a true star or maybe just a very good all-around player who does hits for some contact, some power, steals some bases, plays some defense, does some of everything. Wherever the package ends up, I think it's going to end up as well more than a $3,000 player. Tanner Bybee, who he's playing against, is a good pitcher, but basically everybody's a good pitcher on this slate. So I think we can kind of ignore that and just go with what hitters do we back almost regardless of the opposition. And Lewis at this price, he's certainly one of them.
All right, let's keep covering the bases here, Tanner. After first comes second, and at second base today, I'm asking you which of the 6 pitchers you are rostering on the main slate. Who's your favorite?
So I'm going expensive again here, and then I'll go lower on the other part of the roster. But I do like Framber Valdez at $9,800, 24 fantasy points average in his past 10 games, and he has just been shoving as of late. He's 5-4 on the season with a 2.3 ERA, 77 strikeouts, and a 1.04 WHIP. That WHIP number is sensational. It's something I look at because if you keep guys off the bases, even when you get in trouble at times, you're going to be able to find your way out of it. Also, another thing to note here with Valdez, faced the Angels 4 starts ago, went 8 innings, gave up 3 hits, and had 12 strikeouts. So hopefully he can do that again tonight, and it's going to help your DFS lineup.
All right, Eric, take your pick.
Yeah, a lot of viable options here, but I'm going to go Chris Sale, who is fully back to being Chris Sale, I think, or close enough to it that I'm very confident in him at a pretty inexpensive price, 7,900. The pitchers are all grouped pretty similarly today, except for Framber Valdez. Sale in his first 5 starts this season, an 8.22 ERA, but he did have 30 strikeouts against just 10 walks, so there were some encouraging signs there. Since then, in his last 5, 2.23 ERA, 35 strikeouts against just 4 walks. That control is back. And when he was at his best, he struck guys out and he didn't walk them. He did everything. He's not necessarily back in the elite strikeout territory this season. He was regularly well over 30% strikeout rate at his peak, just shy of 28% now, but that's more than enough against the Reds tonight. I think he makes for one of the strongest, probably the strongest option here, assuming that we can buy his current run to keep on going, and I'm going to do just that.
All right, Gary and Eric says a lot of viable options tonight. You were nodding your Canadian head in agreement. Which one do you like the most?
Yeah, out here looking like a South Park character. Look, I think every pitcher you could make a case for on this slate. It is a very talented and stacked pitching slate for a slate this small. I think I agree with Eric that Chris Sale to me is like the highest floor option of the 5 guys below 8K, but I think the highest ceiling option is in that same game, and it's Hunter Greene, who, yes, he could give up 7 home runs tonight because that's sometimes what happens when Hunter Greene takes the mound. But he's coming off arguably the best start of his career the last time out against an albeit struggling Chicago Cubs lineup. But he's just $7,100. And in his last 3 starts, his strikeout rate is over 42%. I mean, it's really incredible what Hunter Greene has been able to do with the strikeout in the month of May. And I also think this is a pretty good matchup for him. I mean, on paper, the Red Sox are struggling across the last 2 weeks. They have just a 79 WRC plus in that span of time. Hunter Greene sort of famously has reverse splits. It's right-handed batters that give him a bigger issue than left-handed batters. And all of the best bats in Boston's lineup are left-handed batters. I think like Justin Turner is the best right-handed bat that the Boston Red Sox bring to the table every single night. I'm not really afraid of Justin Turner. So I think Hunter Greene can have a really, really good start tonight.
All right, let's move on to third base. Eric, take us to the DK Sportsbook. What is your favorite game bet?
Yeah, it's a tough slate tonight. All 3 money lines are set more or less right where I would set them. I wanted to find something there, but couldn't find my favorite. But my favorite here is instead the under in the Reds-Red Sox game. I'm not sure why this one is up at 9.5. It's minus 120 to the under, so maybe some others feel that same way. But we've talked up Chris Sale and Hunter Greene, and that's exactly why I don't think we should see an over-under this close to 10 with pitchers this good on the mound. I'm in line with Gary on Hunter Greene. He does have some bad starts, although again, with this being 9.5 and with Chris Sale on the other side, it could be 7-2 Red Sox, and we still get the under here. Hunter Greene could give up the homers. He doesn't keep the ball on the ground well, and when hitters do hit the ball, they do tend to hit it fairly hard, but he strikes out so many guys, and he's kept the walks to a manageable level that I think I wouldn't expect most times he faces the Red Sox for him to get knocked around. There's definitely the potential for him to give up 6, but I think most of the time, both of these guys give up 1 or 2.
All right, Gary, and it's a small slate, so where are you looking?
I mean, Eric and I are as close to the exact same bet as you could get without it being the exact same bet. I like the first 5 under in Red Sox. Again, same reasons here. I just think the starting pitching matchup is really, really good. I just talked up Hunter Greene. Eric did a great job of talking up Chris Sale. Sale in his last 5 starts has a 2.32 ERA, and he's holding opponents to a 2.32 WOBA. Strikeout rate hovering around 28%. He's just been really, really solid. And we saw in his last start against the Diamondbacks, I mean, it wasn't amazing, but he still only allowed 1 earned run across 5 innings. And that's what I'm looking for with this particular bet. I just need both of these starters to basically produce a quality start. And this is going to hit because the number is inflated for the first 5 total. It's up all the way at 5. And I just think that's really off, considering that A, the Reds don't have the best lineup in the world, and B, as I mentioned before, the Red Sox have struggled to a 79 WRC plus across the last 2 weeks.
All right, Tanner, what are you riding with?
So I'm going with another total here. I'm going to take the under of 8 in the Guardians-Twins game. Again, another really good pitching matchup that we're going to see tonight. Tanner Bybee on the mound, the youngster, 2.8 ERA with a 1.08 WHIP. Been really good. And the thing I love about him, he keeps the ball down in the zone. The one way the Twins are going to be able to score tonight is by hitting the long ball. And I do expect Bybee to shut that down. On the other side, you got Pablo Lopez, who, when he gets hit, he does get hit hard, as Eric brought up that reference for another pitcher. But I do expect him to get his way out of trouble because of his strikeout ability. 81 Ks in 65 innings this season. And when it comes down to it, neither offense is just that good in this spot. Both teams are hitting 233. The Guardians only have hit 33 homers as a team this season, a lot lower than the Twins. So hopefully the Twins can keep the ball in the yard. Cleveland continues to not hit the ball, and this game stays under.
All right, Gare Bear, we're heading home. As we cross home plate, please tell the people at home, share with the people at home your favorite pitcher prop tonight.
I mean, I'm sort of stunned this is at what it's at.
Yeah,
both
me too.
the line and just the juice. But again, Hunter Green, over 6.5 strikeouts is plus 120. Plus 120, 6.5. I mean, again, 42% strikeout rate his last 3 games. The Red Sox aren't like a high strikeout rate team. Granted, they're sort of middle of the pack the last 2-3 weeks. But Green has gone over this number in 5 of his last 6 starts, and he's done so handily. This isn't somebody scraping by with 7 or 8 strikeouts. He's got double-digit strikeouts in each of his last 2 games. Something would have to go terribly wrong. I think the only way Green doesn't hit this number is if he's forced out in like the 3rd or 4th inning. And even then, if you let Hunter Green face 12 batters, there's a pretty good chance he's going to strike out half those guys. So I just think this number is ridiculously low.
He has surpassed 6.5 strikeouts in 64% of his appearances this season. Eric, talk to me, Goose.
Yeah, that is my number one as well. There are, again, Hunter Green can be beat in some ways, but there's basically no doubts that he's going to strike guys out. I don't know why this is plus 120. I guess because it's set at 6.5, and that feels high. But for Hunter Green, it isn't high. He's had at least 7 strikeouts in 7 of his 11 starts this year, and at half of his starts as a rookie as well. The Red Sox don't strike out a ton, so maybe that's not the best opportunity. But again, 6.5 isn't that hard for a guy who had 8, 10, and 11 in his last 3. I should note that the Twins strike out much more. I think they're leading the league in team strikeout rate this season. Tanner Bybee, you get plus 160 for him to go over 6.5. He's not the strikeout weapon that Hunter Green is, but maybe as a long shot, since you get plus 160, that one's kind of interesting, just to get a second one mentioned there.
Tanner, which guy are you looking at for a prop?
Yeah, so sticking with Tanner Bybee to go over 16.5 outs recorded tonight. Again, great strikeout guy when he wants to be. He's been really good in his past 3 starts, gone over 6 innings in each of those starts. So he has to go 5 2/3 tonight. I really like him to do that because he keeps the ball down in the zone. And the way he's going to stay in this game is by not allowing home runs. If he keeps guys off the bases and he doesn't allow the Twins to do their thing, their one thing that they do pretty well on offense, which is hit the long ball, I do like him to stay in this game. He's a youngster. He's been very good in his time in the show so far. So I'm going to continue to ride with him tonight.
All right, extra bases.
Whoa, we never make it here.
Let's go. Tanner, hit us with a batter prop that you like for today.
Yes.
So the batter prop that I absolutely love tonight, Yordan Alvarez to go over a half walk for plus money against Reed Detmers. Reed Detmers' walk rate is extremely high in the scheme of baseball right now. It is 3.74 walks per 9 innings, and that is very, very poor. And with Alvarez, he's a guy that's going to walk. He's got 2 walks in his past 5 games, but many times pitchers are afraid to throw to him just because he can change a game. Detmer should get lit pretty early in this one, and I think Alvarez might be a benefactor of a walk with guys on base if he doesn't want to, if he wants to avoid a tough batter.
All right, Eric, what's up? What is your batter prop?
I am going Yordan Alvarez as well, although I suppose technically mine is sort of at odds with Tanner's. I'm going him minus 135 on that hits plus runs plus RBI bet. So to go over 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBI. We've done plenty of talking up how good Yordan Alvarez is and why we're not scared of him against lefty. He hits them equally well as he does righty. Pretty good reason to not be too scared. But these hits plus runs plus RBI bets in general, I found them pretty fun since we did a segment on them a couple weeks ago, because in a way they're just a good game bet, right? It's really hard to imagine a stat line that results in only one hit plus run plus RBI that still counts as a good still counts as a good game. And it's hard to imagine a guy going under or going over while having a bad game. I think Yordan Alvarez has a good game here tonight. I think minus 135 is a fine price. Although if Tanner's right and he just walks, I guess we'll have to get there through the run side of this.
All right, Gary, and on this small slate, it is Yordan Alvarez day.
It sounds like that.
It sounds like it.
Am I right?
Am I right? Yeah, am I right?
Yeah, I'm also going to go with a hits plus runs plus RBI prop. But let's talk about the Guardians. We really haven't mentioned them at all so far in this segment, aside from, their very young and promising starting pitcher tonight. But Pablo Lopez, for as good as his surface numbers are, I think that's partly a product of the fact he got off to such a good start this season. There's been some worrying signs in his recent outings. In fact, in his last 7 starts, his ERA is 5.67, and he's specifically had issues with left-handed bats. Lefties have a 363 WOBA and are hitting 2.2 home runs per 9 against Lopez in that span of time. So I do think you can attack the betting market here, specifically that hits, RBIs, and runs prop with some of the left-handed bats at the top of the Guardians order, whether that's Jose Ramirez, I guess you could do Josh Bell at the same time. It really comes down to whichever number you like the most. I think Stephen Kwan sticks out in particular at minus 130, just considering he is the leadoff hitter. He's got a knack for getting on base, whether that is a hit or a walk. He doesn't strike out all that much. He puts balls in play. So I think Kwan minus 130 to go over 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs tonight is a pretty good bet.
You three have done such a tremendous job this morning that, in fact, we have a bonus question for you.
What?
And this is one of the highest rated segments that we have done in the history of this show, which dates back decades. Thorn in my side, baby. Gare Bear, it is your time to shine. So you got to hook us up with your biggest fade of the night.
Okay.
Could be DFS or on the sportsbook side here, Garion. It is your selection, your choice, and then either Tanner or Eric will actually have both of them. They will explain to us whether they're going to agree or disagree with your pick. So please, fade away, my sweet chinchilla.
You should definitely have both of them get the opportunity to talk about how stupid I am.
Yes.
That's for everyone. I'm going to fade Framber Valdez tonight. And I know Tanner did a good job of talking him up earlier. And I already said, you can pretty much make the case for any pitcher on this slate. But Valdez is so expensive in comparison to every other starter on this 3-gamer. And I think every one of those guys has potential value. I just don't want to pay $9,800 for someone who I don't think is $2,000 better than someone like Chris Sale or someone like Hunter Green. Valdez has done a good job this season of cutting down his walks. He's done a good job of going over a strikeout per 9 innings. He's less of a contact manager in the eyes of the DFS community and more of a strikeout pitcher, to his credit. But his expected ERA is up over 4. It is a 1.5 higher than his actual ERA so far this season. And you have to give the Angels lineup some credit. They have a 118 WRC plus the last 2 weeks as the second best mark in the American League. And for the season as a whole, they have a 120 WRC plus against left-handed pitchers compared to a 105 WRC plus against right-handed pitchers. So I just think this is a pretty locked-in Angels lineup right now. We saw Trout and Ohtani hit a home run yesterday.
Yeah, that was hot.
Maybe that happens again tonight. I don't know. But I think there's better options than Valdez at almost 10K.
All right, Tanner, when he mentioned Valdez, you did one of these here. You went, like the veins in your neck were popping out. Explain to us again why Garion is wrong.
Yeah, I got to disagree here.
Yeah!
With Valdez, you're getting the consistency. You've seen what he's done. You've seen what he's done against the Angels, too. That 12 strikeout performance 4 starts ago was something special. And if he can do that tonight, you're going to be very successful with your DFS lineups, no matter how much he costs. Looking at the other pitchers on the slate, I love Hunter Green, but there is a lot of inconsistency there. Chris Sale getting back to being Chris Sale, but he's still not the old Chris Sale. Bivey's a young guy. Pablo Lopez, when he gets hit hard, he gets hit hard. And then Reed Detmers, I would 100% fade there. So if I'm looking at a pitcher on the slate tonight, I got to be willing to pay for Valdez because he's leaps and bounds better than the rest of the crew.
Eric, what side of the fight are you on?
So I think I agree with most of what Garion says
Oh,
here.
no.
I'm impressed by Valdez.
Oh.
And I don't think that I would price him above the rest. But for game theory reasons, you might end up his way. If you've built your hitting lineup and you just find that you actually do have a little bit of extra cash and you can fit in Valdez, I think the fact that he might actually be a worse deal makes him a good deal in some reasons because other people will be off him, if that makes sense. I think he's still very viable, and if I have the cash, I would go up to him. I think my top fade, this is going to sound weird because I've just talked him up multiple times this segment.
No.
Hunter Green for DFS purposes. Hunter Green, I love using him, but if I'm not using him, if I'm looking at pitchers with blow-up potential, again, I might bet on him in certain areas and DFS a stack against him because if things go wrong for him, they're more likely to go very wrong than they are for other pitchers. So if you're having to choose between talented pitchers to stack against, at least pick the one who has a home run problem to go with his amazing strikeout ability.
All right, thanks, fellas. All the time we have for MLB. NBA Finals do start this evening, and Julian Edlow caught up with Brian Scalabrine to talk all about it.
True.
All right, as promised, we're bringing Brian Scalabrine into the Unreasonable Odds podcast, a man of many positions, and of course, a 2008 champion with the Boston Celtics, as you see on the banner behind him. Celtics not playing in this NBA Finals, almost became the first team to complete that comeback, and then kind of an all-time no-show in Game 7. Scal, just give me your thoughts real quick on the series, and then overall that dud of a Game 7.
Yeah, I think when you go through a season and you're inconsistent or you want to play the game of live by the three, die by the three, I think you can get these situations. Let's face it, Game 2 was a must-win, didn't show up in the fourth quarter. Game 3 was a must-win, didn't show up for the entire game. Game 7, obviously a must-win, and they, they just laid an egg. So they had their moments. The thing that kind of it piques everyone's interest about this Celtic team is when they are good, when they're playing good basketball, they're amazing. But you got to be consistent. Miami is the epitome of consistent. They might not have the highest of highs, but their floor is pretty high, and they're as disciplined, as consistent as you will see. And it's not just against the Celtics. They were like that against the Bucks. They were like that against the Knicks, and then they finished it off against the Celtics. Me including, and a lot of other people are counting them out of the NBA Finals. Like, how can they beat Denver? But man, how can they beat the Bucks? How can they beat the Celtics? They keep on continuing to shock the world.
Exactly. You just mentioned the path right there. Miami has taken down a lot of contenders, to get here, and now it's Denver. So I, like you, I think that Denver, you mentioned consistency. Denver at least has been consistent so far in the playoffs. They've been playing really well. They don't go long stretches without scoring because they can dump it down to Jokic. They know how to beat the zone. It seems like a matchup where this comes to an end for Miami. But I'm just curious what you think the most important keys to this series. You already pretty much showed your hand. You're picking Denver. But, do you think it's going to be a quick series, a long series? What do you think some of the keys are going to be?
Yeah, so I think Bam Adebayo is phenomenal at all those dribble handoffs, those pin-aways, the back screens, the plays you see with Duncan Robinson or Gabe Vincent, or not necessarily Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler kind of uses it as an isolation. I think if I was Miami and I was Spoelstra, I'd run a steady diet of action with Bam Adebayo. He's so athletic, he could do a lot of things. I don't think he's as good as Jokic, but he's different than Jokic. But each guy, when they have the ball, each center, when they have the ball, it's really difficult to guard. So I think if I'm Miami, I still got to play with a tremendous amount of patience. But I think a lot of the offense running through Bam Adebayo would be the direction that I would go early on. Jokic, I don't think he's an awful defensive player, but I do feel like that is a place that you can exploit them coming off dribble handoffs and screens with Bam. So if there was a such thing as a screen assist stat, I would play that stat with the Miami Heat with Bam Adebayo, because I just think you're going to see a steady diet of Bam with the basketball. And then on the other end of the floor, you mentioned it, like Jokic is too good to be fooled by anything. So yeah. Miami has, thrown in the junk defenses, the 3-2, the 2-3. He do all that stuff. Jokic has an answer for all that. So I'm not necessarily optimistic about Miami defensively against the Denver Nuggets.
Last quick one for you. A lot of people saying, is this an easier or harder game for Miami or Denver based on the huge layoff for Denver and Miami coming off the Game 7? They're dinged up, long series. You're traveling out way above sea level. I think if there's one spot in the series I'm most confident in, it's Denver winning game one. But I've heard some of the other side. Which side of that are you on?
You know, I feel like this generation of players, they really do well with rest. So I'm kind of with you on that one. You know, I just feel in my experience, rust used to be the big factor. I think we're trending away from that. I think this group of young guys, when they're getting their individual skill workout and they're feeling really good about their game, I don't think that these guys are going to feel rusty. So I like Denver in a high-scoring first half in game one, but, never underestimate the Miami Heat. I just don't think this thing is going to be a slugfest.
Scal, thanks for joining us, man.
You got it.
Okay, all right. NBA Finals begin tonight. The rest versus rust conversation has been already deeply exhausted.
Yep, that's right.
So fun to talk about that. Should we talk about it? No. Please don't, Emerson.
I'm not going to mention
absolutely
diddly do.
And I'm begging you guys, DraftKings contributors Julian Edlow, Jeff Pratt, and DK Nation's Chinmay Vaidya, don't talk about it.
I did talk about the rest versus rust thing with Rachel Nichols.
With Rachel Nichols, I know you did.
Yeah,
but
I know. Maybe we'll get DK to tweet something out about it today.
Everyone has been talking about it all week. And
True.
It's like no one knows the answer. It goes either way every time.
All right, Jules, so let's take a quick break from that. Before we dive into the finals tonight, I have a question for you. Why did Detroit just make Monty Williams the richest head coach in NBA history, signing him to a 6-year contract that could be worth up to $100 million with incentives?
Well, apparently they very much believe in Monty Williams. And I do too.
Oh, really? Is that why they
Williams
did it?
Yeah.
It's just a dart throw. It's just a dart throw.
So here's like this NBA coaching carousel that we have is all about fit right now. And Monty Williams didn't work out in Phoenix, even though he took him to a finals. Monty Williams wouldn't have worked out in Boston, for example. Everybody shouting for Joe Mazzulla's job. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown don't need, great guy like Monty Williams to just ensure them and help coach them along. They need somebody that's going to yell at them and get the best out of them, kind of like Ime Udoka did. Whereas Detroit's in this rebuild mode. They want to bring along Cade Cunningham, who lost pretty much all of last year due to injury. They have Jaden Ivey. They have Duren. They have, unfortunately for them, the 5th pick in this upcoming draft, which will still be a nice piece, although it's not the piece they were looking for. This is a guy that knows how to, bring up young talent, and he's a great leader. So it seems like a good fit coaching to me. But the reason they overpaid him is because they just decided they wanted him and nobody else, and they had the money to do it.
All right, Chinmay, Jules kind of mentioned it. Pistons still trying to complete this rebuild here. Is this hire a step in the right direction, in your opinion?
It's a step in the right direction for Monty Williams. I think he has been overwhelmed by expectations with the Suns over the last 3 seasons. You have a team that went to the finals when nobody really expected them to get to the finals that year with Chris Paul. Then they win the most games in the NBA and flounder against the Dallas Mavericks in a Game 7. And then on top of all that, they trade for Kevin Durant this season, and immediately the expectations go through the roof that they're going to win a championship. And that's just, it starts to build on a coach over time. And I think for Monty Williams, this is a good reset for him. The Pistons are going to be competitive at some point, but as Julian mentioned, Monty Williams does have a bit of that reputation as building teams up, and the Pistons were willing to overpay to make sure that he didn't go to another situation. And I honestly don't know if Monty Williams would have gone to a situation where there was the pressure to win immediately, because he had just experienced that and it didn't go as well as one would have expected in Phoenix. So I think this is definitely a good situation for Monty Williams, and I think the Pistons will benefit from it as well.
All right, Jeff, there were impossibly high expectations for Williams after Durant joined Phoenix. What are his expectations now with a team that has had the NBA's worst record over the last half decade?
Just to develop these guys and maybe win a couple of basketball games. Like both of these guys have said, Monty Williams is a player's coach. He is a very good track record of successfully developing and, putting out good products with high usage guards. We look at Devin Booker, Chris Paul. He's got a backcourt, which is not Devin Booker and Chris Paul, but Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham could be really good in this league. And they need a guy who's going to nurture them along the way and turn them into their potential, and Kate Cunningham especially, he's coming off an injury last year, didn't play the majority of the season. He really could use a nice bounce back year. Jaden Ivey was fantastic in his rookie season. They just need a steady presence in the locker room. I think that Dwayne Casey provided that to an extent, but he was always going to be the guy they moved on from to find the next guy to really move them into this new era of Detroit basketball, which is hopefully eventually winning some basketball games.
All right, guys, let's talk series plays here. Chinmay,
the
who's your
finals tonight? Crazy.
Yeah. We talked about. I think they know what we're talking about,
Thanks,
brother.
man.
Yeah.
Hey, man,
hey
you're welcome.
guys, don't know if you know, NBA Finals they start tonight. It's going to be the Heat and the Nuggets. So, Chinmay, what I want to know is who's your captain for the entire series? Can you afford for it not to be like Jokic here? I don't know.
Oh yeah, so he for the entire series as your captain would be
Pricey.
$21,000.
But can you afford not to have him?
No.
I think it's got to be Jokic or Butler. I don't really think there's any other options, and I would lean Jokic just because of the track record. I mean, he's averaging a 30-point triple-double in the postseason. I don't know how you can bet against that until it doesn't happen. The Heat will throw some different looks at Jokic. I'm sure there will be some adjustments, and I'm sure that Miami has a plan for Jokic, but until you stop him and until he is stopped and limited, it's hard to go against him in the captain spot. And Jimmy Butler, we know his usage is going to be through the roof for the Heat. So those are the two picks for me, and I don't think there's really any other options.
Yeah. Jeff, do you agree? I mean, there's no other way to play this. You got to take one of those guys.
I think there is another way to play this.
What?
I'll talk about it. Oh, I'll talk about it just because Chinmay took the obvious answer. I think Jokic is the play, if we're being realistic here. It should be him. I honestly am not that interested in Jimmy Butler just because we've seen Miami's role players step up so much over the last few series. But just looking at the price gap between Nikola Jokic and Jimmy Butler at the top compared to the rest of these players, I feel like it could make sense to take the guy in that next range right below them, which is Jamal Murray. I mean, for game one at their respective captain prices, Murray is almost $5,000 cheaper than Nikola Jokic. And we know how incredible Jokic is from a fantasy standpoint. The guy dropped 70 points in his sleep. That being said, Murray has been Denver's best player at times throughout this postseason. Jokic has even admitted that. He says, sometimes I'm the Nuggets' best player, sometimes I'm not. And I'm cool with that. And to have a superstar that is that unselfish is pretty nice on your team. But in the Western Conference Finals, Jamal Murray racked up 54-plus fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games against the Lakers. 2 of those were 60-point outings. Miami's going to be so focused on trying to contain Jokic. I don't think that's going to work, but they're going to try. That Murray might be able to get pretty much whatever he wants in this series from an offensive standpoint. He's been that guy for them consistently in the playoffs. I think that's a trend that's going to continue in this series. So Jokic is the obvious play. Butler's the obvious play on Miami's side. But I think Murray has some potential here.
Julian, do you think Jeff has just presented a viable plan?
No, Jokic, and I'm not even considering Butler. There's one player with a ceiling way higher than anyone else's in this series, and that's the only guy I'm willing to captain, and I'll find other ways to make that up. Not just because of what he's done, but also because this is maybe the best matchup of the playoffs so far for Jokic. He's going to get a way undersized center in Bam. If Bam gets in any kind of foul trouble or when he's on the bench, Cody Zeller and Kevin Love? If they switch to zone, Jokic will pick apart the zone. There's one guy I'm considering.
Is that right?
The selection by Taco Bell.
Oh,
Nikola
man.
Jokic.
Well, yeah. Okay. I'm super hungry here. Who are you going to stack? Who else is in your lineup, Jules?
So I think the Heat role players will probably get a lot of the attention for the series they had. Martin, Vincent down the line. I don't mind going a little value on the Denver side, which is hard. You know, they don't go as deep. They play their starters a lot. I think a guy like Bruce Brown, who has big games off the bench from time to time, it's hard to pinpoint them. But if you're going to play Jokic, you're going to need to build some guys around him. And I also think, if we're talking specific to game one, I think we maybe have some blowout potential here, given some of those guys further down the bench, an even larger chance to pick up some garbage time minutes.
All right, Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going with Michael Porter Jr. I really like his prospects heading into the series. If we just look at the matchups, Bam's going to be on Jokic. We all know that Jokic really requires a defend by committee approach, so other guys are already going to be distracted. Jimmy's likely going to be on Jamal Murray. A lot of the time, teams like to hide their best player on other lesser offensive players, but that's not how the Heat do things, and that's definitely not how Jimmy Butler does things. He wants the best guy he can physically guard, so he's going to be on Murray. That leaves some sort of combination of Caleb Martin and Max Strus to throw at Michael Porter Jr., and no offense meant to either of those guys, especially Caleb Martin, who channeled prime Michael Jordan at times in the Eastern Conference Finals. But I'm not sure how they're supposed to guard MPJ. Both of them are 6'5". He's a legit 6'10" with a 3-level scoring ability. He's quite literally dollar store Kevin Durant. And I mean that in the nicest way possible to Michael Porter Jr. I think it's possible we see Jimmy shift to him at times throughout this series, but for the majority of the series, Porter Jr. should be able to get pretty much whatever he wants.
Chinmay, what's your stacking strategy here, dude?
Well, I talked about, Jokic's production over these playoffs and how you can't fade that. And I just don't know how you can avoid Caleb Martin, even at 7,400. He had 5 games, I believe, over 30 DK fantasy points, had 48 or more in the last 2 games of the series against the Celtics. Just the way he's shooting the ball right now, it's not really that much more efficient than what he was shooting in the regular season. If you look at his stats, he's just doing it at a greater clip, but the volume has increased and the efficiency hasn't gone down. So I just think Caleb Martin is playing with so much confidence right now that even at 7,400, that's actually a bargain in my opinion, because he's producing, close to 45, 50 points in fantasy contests throughout these playoffs. And I think that's worth it, especially when you're paying up for Jokic. Give me Caleb Martin to keep his production going.
All right, let's talk DK Sportsbook here. Need your play for game 1. Jules Nuggets favored by 8.5. Total is sitting at 219.
Yeah, like I said, if there's one game in this series that I'm most confident in any single team showing up, it's game 1 for the Nuggets. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little rust versus rest.
God.
It just the imbalance here in terms of time off. When I was talking to Scal, I don't even know if this part aired in the interview that we did before the segment. Scal was talking about how in his day, this would be considered a rust spot maybe, but now NBA players are trained to rest. In the era of load management, rest is a good thing. So these 9 days off for Denver, they are going to be ready. Fresh legs here. Miami, tired legs, 7-game series, a lot of hard work, the pressure of not being the team that gives up the 3-0 lead in that series. And now quick turnaround and you're going to fly somewhere where, sure, the elevation, but Denver's 38-4 at home when Jokic plays this season. They are dominant. They do everything at home that the Celtics are not, giving away all those games to Miami. So I think that Denver gets all over them early. I'll lay 5.5, whatever it is for the first half. I think this one has a swift start for Denver. If you want to look at Jokic first quarter props, you remember that game 1 against the Lakers where he had like 8 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists first quarter, something crazy like that. I think he starts this game off like that.
All right, Chinmay, you were nodding along to that entire answer from Julian.
Big nodding.
A lot of nods, but I'm actually going Heat plus 8.5.
Oh.
And there's very little logic with this Miami team in the entire postseason. I think they've won 3 game 1s in the postseason. I don't think they lost a game 1 in these playoffs, and they've won a road game in every single series. Spoelstra had a great comment yesterday or whenever he did media day that basically, they'll tip this thing off at the top of Mount Everest if they need to. But they don't really care about location. I think they've had 48 hours to adjust to the altitude. So I don't think that the elevation is going to be as much of a factor. And I just think Miami's played tough this entire postseason. I understand that, Denver's rested and they've gotten their legs underneath them, but I'm going with the Heat to at least cover the spread. They might not win outright. Those tired legs might show late in the fourth quarter, but I think Miami keeps this close.
Jeff, you sicko. I saw you sticking out your tongue. I know you're riding with the Heat, too.
Ew, Jeff.
Whoa.
Disgusting.
It's like the TikTok, where you, stick your tongue out.
Yeah. I agree with Jimmy.
Yeah, I know.
I'm riding with Heat in half. This is a tricky one, right? I don't want it. Both these guys have touched on the rest versus rust situation, etc. Nuggets are undefeated at home so far in the playoffs, 38-4 when Jokic plays in this building, etc. They're going to be well rested. The Heat have to be exhausted. They just went to 7 games against Boston, but they, as Chimme said, they have won every single game one on the road in these playoffs. They stunned Milwaukee. They beat New York in their building. They stunned Boston. Something has to give here. So while I am leaning towards a Nuggets win, I think 8.5 points is a lot to cover. So I'm rolling with Miami over the spread.
Chimme, give me your series prop. Give me your top series prop for this series, the finals, NBA Finals.
So in terms of a player prop, I touched on this yesterday. I like Jimmy Butler to have the highest individual scoring performance, comes in at plus 170. I do think that Jokic is a bit more prone to distributing the ball and racking up assists than Butler. We've seen Butler go for huge numbers, 50 plus against the Bucks, had a couple of 40-point games, I believe, against the Knicks, and then one against the Celtics, maybe high 30s against Boston. But I like Jimmy Butler for the individual market. And then on the series spread, I actually think Heat plus 2.5 games at minus 145 is pretty solid value. I might wait until after game one if the Nuggets end up winning this to take that, and that number might even get a little lower. But I do think Miami keeps this series close. I don't think they lose in 4 or 5. I think this goes at least 6, maybe even 7 if the Heat can get a split in the first 2 games.
Go ahead, young Jeffrey.
Yeah, before I make my actual pick, and I'm looking at the player milestone sections on DraftKings Sportsbook, I'd like to point out that Nikola Jokic to record 15-plus assists in any NBA Finals game is only plus 220 right now. And everything about that is absolutely absurd. I mean, a 15-assist game for any player in the NBA is ridiculously impressive, but we're talking about a 7-foot center here. And all of that said, it's plus 220 because it's actually within the realm of possibility here. The guy's racked up double-digit assists in 7 of his last 8 games. I just thought that was pretty crazy to see the odds there for a game that would be that insane. But moving on to my actual pick, I like Caleb Martin to record 10-plus rebounds in any NBA Finals game at plus money. I'm done doubting Caleb Martin until further notice. I've got a couple of texts before Game 7 saying, I feel like this could be the time where Caleb Martin finally cools off. And, well, he shut me up pretty quickly. So I'm sorry to the city of Boston. Apparently I'm responsible for your jinx there. But he's racked up double-digit rebounds, in both Game 6 and 7 versus the Celtics. I expect him to see a ton of minutes in this series because the Heat aren't going to Kevin Love. They aren't going to Cody Zeller. So Caleb Martin has to step up, play more 4 in this series. I think he'll have a decent shot to rack up 10-plus boards again.
Jules, what do you like in the series prop department?
Yeah, it's a tough series to bet with the mismatch in terms of the pricing. I will lay some pretty heavy juice here, but I will say it's priced very well on DraftKings Sportsbook. Like I said, I love the Nuggets in Game 1, so if you're going to take a minus 400 or larger favorite to win the series, they are going to buck the trend of the Heat winning Game 1s on the road. The Knicks one, I have nothing to say about. They were just the better team there. Game 1 in Milwaukee, Giannis goes down and gets hurt mid-game. You take that one. Game 1 in Boston, Celtics coming off a big Game 7 win. Teams coming off a Game 7 win going into Game 1 has historically been an awful spot, which now the Heat are in, coming off a Game 7 win and going on the road in a Game 1. So Nuggets to win Game 1 and win the series was minus 205 on DraftKings Sportsbook. It's now minus 230. I will still recommend it because it's priced nowhere better than minus 250 in other places in the market, and a lot of books have it up at minus 320 to minus 340 range. So we're talking about a full dollar in juice here in terms of price differentials. So a minus 230 isn't always a bad bet if you're getting a really good price compared to the rest of the market, and I think this is that.
All right, guys, you have like 10 seconds for this answer per person. Series feature, Jeff, what is it?
Yeah, I've doubted the Miami Heat at every possible opportunity in this playoffs. I'm not anymore. Give me Heat plus 320 to win the NBA Finals. The talent gap is massive. It doesn't matter with this team.
Jules.
I just gave mine on the Game 1 and series result, but Jeff now flipping sides as soon as the Heat.
What am I supposed to do, Julian?
All right, I said 10
what am
seconds.
I supposed to do?
I said 10 seconds.
You're chewing.
I said
going to.
10 seconds.
No.
All right, Chinmay.
Chinmay, you have 5
Time's
seconds.
up. I already said what I need to say.
Chinmay.
Nuggets 4-2 comes in at plus 400 on the DK Sportsbook.
Hell yeah, Chinmay!
Thank you, Chinmay.
Hell yeah,
All right,
Chinmay!
Emerson, now quick wrap.
Okay, up next, Stanley Cup Final doesn't get going until Saturday. Our analysts will dish out some DFS plays and sportsbook plays coming up right after this quick break.
The Stanley Cup Final, Game 1 coming our way on Saturday between the Golden Knights and the Florida Panthers.
Team of Destiny, Jesse Cofield.
Those Florida teams really doing the Boston teams wrong this year. All right, let's bring in Pete, Paul, and AJ for NHL opening faceoff, guys. We will get into your favorite DFS plays for DK Series content available for the Stanley Cup finals.
True,
Very
true.
excited about that.
But right now,
Oh,
hold
right.
up,
Really
right?
quick. I'm getting ahead of myself.
No. It's okay. It's okay. Hang in there. We have big news coming out of Pittsburgh this morning, AJ, as the Penguins have named ex-Maple Leafs GM Paul Kyle Dubas, president of hockey operations. So he wasn't unemployed for long here, AJ, about like a week or so. As a Penguins fan, how much faith do you have in this guy? Because something tells me that Maple Leafs fans like Paul are happy to see him go.
As
He's all
Paul
yours.
said, you can have him.
Well, anybody who says that, and I know Paul is saying it, is dead wrong.
Ooh.
When you consider the fact that he constructed a fantastic team for them that is underperformed in the postseason. That's not Dubas's fault. Like, oh, I'm sorry. It was Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares just not enough help for the team? Like, this guy constructed a great team. By all accounts, the people around him in Toronto that worked in the front office loved working for him, created a great culture there. And he is a guy that is willing to combine both analytics and on ice. So to have him in the president of hockey operations role, I think is perfect. They're still going to bring in a GM to, as far as I'm aware, to be kind of a partner with Kyle Dubas. And I love the hire. I think there is nothing they're getting better in Toronto, and they recently hired a replacement, and I think they're worse off for it.
Paul, how can he find more success in Pittsburgh than he did with your Toronto squad?
He better get off to a better start managing the salary cap, because he spent the last 5 years trying to clean up that mess that he did in year one. So I hope he gets to a better start for AJ's sake, because otherwise it's going to be wash, rinse, repeat. This guy has a tendency for not being a very good negotiator and opening the vault, and I don't know how Fenway Group is going to like that aspect. Maybe Sidney Crosby is going to come back for a raise. I'm not sure if he's read the clippings, but I can tell him that Kyle is very good at spending other people's money. And as far as analytics, guys, let me give you a quick lesson. I'm the guy that created the original round of analytics in 1992. And some of you know that, most of your listeners don't.
Yeah.
And it was relying on individual stats, not team stats. And just because players are on the ice, some of the stats that they generate in Kyle Dubas's world have been overinflated. And that's why the Leafs made mistakes after mistakes building around this team with people who have had flawed analytics. And I can go on and on about this for hours.
Yeah. All right. Well, we don't have hours, Paul. But Pete, what should be atop his to-do list in Pittsburgh?
Maybe goaltending, right? I mean, Tristan Jarry's a potential free agent. That's been holding the team back. This past year, they had that home game against Chicago late in the season. Probably should have won that game. They were huge favorites. They lost it. They missed the playoffs despite Crosby, Malkin, and Letang being healthy for a change for almost the entire season. I know Letang had the one health scare, but he even came back after that. So there were not a lot of excuses like in the past. And even prior years, I mean, Pittsburgh was like first round exit every single year for 4 or 5 years prior to missing the playoffs this year. So I think it starts with the goaltending, starts with the middle six forward group, and just trying to find those hidden gems to maximize your value. But yeah, I do agree that like the job that he did in Toronto, could be, I think their failures in certain spots could be pinned, not always on him, sometimes on the coach, sometimes on Shanahan. It's just one of those things where it's a collective failure, I feel like, for the group. But the roster that he did build, for the most part, was top 5 in the NHL in wins over the past 5 seasons combined. So in that way, I guess the regular season numbers don't lie.
All right, now to the Stanley Cup final, guys. Vegas, Florida. Let's get those series plays for our series contest. So, Pete, who's your captain for the entire series?
I mean, it's hard for me to find anybody better in terms of value in DFS than Jonathan Marchessault right now. I mean, the guy has absolutely ignited since early on in the Edmonton series. He got off to a slow start, but he's been leading Vegas in shots on goal this entire postseason. And now he's starting to reap the rewards of some of those shots starting to fall, right? 15 points, including 9 goals in his past 10 games. So, like, I feel like he's not the name value type guy of a Kachuk or an Eichel or a Stone, guys like that. But he's been as productive, if not more, than anybody in this series over the past 2 rounds.
AJ, series captain.
Yeah, I think it all depends on how you see the series playing out. I think if you're going to go short, if you think it's a 4 or 5 game series, you have to consider using one of the net miners. I expect it to go longer, 6 or 7. So I'm looking at Jonathan Marchessault here. 13.5 is the price tag. That's a big discount compared to the top of the price range. He's got 1 fewer point than Jack Eichel, significantly cheaper, and actually has more goals in the postseason than Eichel. So I think if you're on Vegas in a long series, Marchessault makes the most sense.
All right, Paul, what's your strategy here?
These guys are both wrong. You got to go with the goalie in this set. It's Sergei Bobrovsky's series to lose, the MVP for the whole playoffs. The guy's been awesome. Everybody knows it. And in a series like this where goaltending is going to be a big difference, I think Adin Hill, new to this stage. I mean, he's had a very nice playoff, but this is where this really serious shooting gets going. And I think, Florida's goalie is going to hold on to his exceptional level of play simply because he's done it before. But I'm not as confident as Adin Hill. And look, he's leader in the Conn Smythe Trophy betting lines. And I agree with that because he's been the most important player of these playoffs. I think that's going to continue in this series.
All right, guys, quick on this last one here. Pete, tell me who you're going to stack with your captain, please.
Stack with my captain. It's got to be Ivan Barbashev, the even strength line mate with Eichel and Marchessault. I mean, I think even though I'm picking Florida to win the series, I think Vegas could put up a lot of offense, especially at 5-on-5. And that's probably the best line trio of the entire postseason at large. And with Barbashev being around a point per game player after coming over from the trade deadline, I mean, look at how Vegas won, not only maybe the offseason by getting Bruce Cassidy away from Boston. Now Boston's sitting at home and Cassidy's in the Cup final. Barbashev was a sneaky move right before the deadline that nobody was really talking about that has paid enormous dividends here.
All right, AJ, have at it.
Yeah, exactly the same. Since I'm captaining Marchessault, I think you have to get Barbashev in there. Look, even if you're somebody like Paul who's going to go with Bobrovsky, I think at 4,800, Barbashev just makes a ton of sense here. Super cheap for a guy playing on a line with Marchessault and Eichel. If you can swing it, get all 3. That's going to be my approach. Captain Marchessault, get Eichel and Barbashev in there, get that whole line. But like I said, even if you're on the other side and looking at captaining Bobrovsky, I think Barbashev just makes too much sense at his price tag.
All right, Paul, quickly, bring us home.
I'm all in on Florida. How can you not include Matthew Tkachuk? Did everybody forget what he did in the last series? 3 game winners and just physical, aggressive forecheck. That latter point is going to be a team-wide focus of the Panthers, and they're going to wear out the Vegas defense. And speaking of defense, how about Montour and Forsling playing up to 25 to 30 minutes a game, leading the Florida attack? I'm all in on Florida, and those 4 guys make sense to me.
All right, good stuff, guys. That is a show. Slate begins this evening at 5. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 11 a.m.